Hi, my name is Colin Campbell-Boussiere. I'm going to be talking about the impacts of systemic oppression on students' learning in urban public schools. Really quick definitions. We're going to be talking a lot about systemic oppression. We're going to be using the word urban a lot, and we're going to be talking about trauma. When I talk about systemic oppression, I'm not talking about this judge or this police officer or this teacher really hates black people, right? I'm talking about institutional oppression. I'm talking about systemically, just neglecting or harming a group of people because of their social identity group. When I talk about urban, I'm just talking about a geographical location. And when I'm talking about trauma, it's exactly how you understand that, talking about a psychic or behavioral state resulting from severe mental or emotional injury. This is the big piece that connects systemic oppression to education, so pay attention. Really quick disclaimer, you can read through this to really understand this deeply, but I just want to make a couple points. Firstly, we're talking about urban public schools because that's the focus of this class. These problems extend outside of that context, though. I also want to just be clear that urban communities are really diverse, racially and culturally, as well as economically and socially. And so the things that we're talking about here today, we're talking about a large group of kids who go to public school in urban communities, but there are tons of kids who grow up in the city who have a very different experience. All right, so I'm going to skip over that in the interest of time, jump straight into our intro, which is going to hit a similar point. Don't skip the intro. Okay. I intend to show that urban school districts in America are faced with an opportunity gap, not an achievement gap. I intend to show that the causes of this opportunity gap are grounded in institutional decisions and actions, not grounded merely in the actions of individuals. This does not mean that you are helpless as an individual, right? Be a teacher. Be the best teacher you absolutely can be. You as an individual can solve things on a small scale. But in order to affect larger change, this means that we need to look outside of the school as well. Images did not feel appropriate. All right. I will use lots of images, but not here. What does systemic oppression look like in America today? Super fast. We're looking at racial injustice in the U.S. Prison system and policing, racism in employment and hiring practices, the impact of the history of redlining in current home ownership, racial wealth gap, political representation of minority communities, and so much more. In the interest of time, I can't go into a ton of detail about any of these. Hopefully you already know a ton about them. I've attached hyperlinks to all of these pieces. Big thing, despite crimes being committed, roughly proportional to populations, right? 76% of people are white, 76% of drug users are white, 14% of people are black, 14% of drug users are black, 8% of people in the U.S. are Hispanic, and 8% of drug users are Hispanic. But despite that, our prisons don't reflect that. Racism in employment, and these are actually, this talks about two different studies, this talks about one study, but these studies are fascinating. Just understand that black people have to spend 50% more time sending in applications in order to get hired in the United States, despite us being a society that no longer thinks of itself as being racist. Redlining and homeownership in the past has had a really big impact on people's wealth today. Son of a Seabiscuit, don't do this. It's trying to... Alright, let's see if we can... There we go. Nice! I overwrote it. Alright, redlining refers to maps like this, which banks and people trying to buy houses use to value different communities. The article that I attached shows that, the article that I attached shows that these maps didn't actually didn't necessarily discourage people from moving, but rather ended up being a justification for people who already didn't want to live in these communities. Encourage white flight, which gets tied into racial wealth gap. This graphic, I think, speaks volumes. You can already see here just how we don't just have a huge gap in who has the average average white household, the value that they have in their house and their assets versus the average black and Hispanic household. This is according to Forbes. You can see the article that I cited even had more drastic numbers, but it's growing, right? It's getting worse. The crash in 2008 brought it a little bit closer. People who had more to lose, but you can see it's already starting to widen. Right, white wealth is going up while black and Hispanic wealth is still going down and not recovering. Political representation, again, couple graphics. You can watch it go slowly up from 1965 to present. This at 44 representatives in Congress out of 535, that we're still just at 8% of Congress people being black relative to 14% of the population. Here is looking at presidential cabinets. Again, no image. So how does systemic oppression impact communities? First really big piece, trauma. So when I talk about trauma, I'm referring back to what we just discussed, right? Fear of being unduly arrested, chronic unemployment, etc. When your prefrontal cortex, well, I'll get into that in just a second. Sanctuary Model with Sandra Bloom. She's incredible. She's a professor over at Drexel. Read her articles talking about the impact that all of these historic factors and all these present factors have in terms of causing trauma. Again, another article attached here that I think is really helpful. So here's where I was trying to go a second ago. Trauma and education. So when you experience chronic trauma, cortisol in your brain goes up. When cortisol goes up, your prefrontal cortex goes down. Prefrontal cortex is in charge of everything from understanding consequences to understanding everything from consequences to concepts of time, right? Should I do my homework? But it also it affects your language centers, right? It affects your ability to do math. Hunger has very similar effects. Actually, hunger ends up being very closely related to trauma. I didn't actually link the Philadelphia Hunger Project here, but in addition to the links I provided, that's also incredibly helpful information on how that affects brains and how people learn when they don't eat. Think about yourself. If you didn't eat for a day, how well would you do your job? Outside responsibilities in education. When resources are scarce, think about that wealth gap. Kids have to do more in order to support the family. And when you have to do more outside of school, it means you have less energy to work on school and ability to go to college. The link here talks about AP exams, but if you don't, big picture, if you don't think you're going to go to college, or if college is more expensive for you because you don't get as many AP classes in high school, then think about how that ends up impacting the decisions you make when you're in high school and grade school. So how does this impact school? All of those things we just talked about a second ago, right? All of these pieces right here, they cost money, right? If we're going to address trauma, right? If we're going to take on Sandra Bloom's sanctuary model in our school, if we're going to get social workers, right? If we're going to provide food, if we're going to, again, social workers and other resources, support kids with outside responsibilities, if we need to do extra coaching to help kids navigate the college process and understand that they can go to college, well, we need more money for that, right? And the reality is we have decreased resources. Again, see studies. Think about Lower Merion versus the Philadelphia School District. It's a perfect example. $32,000 per student per year in Lower Merion versus $7,500 per student per year in Philadelphia. It's not even close. So it's about the money, Lebowski, right? So who gets blamed and why does that matter? The problem is we're doing all this to disadvantage teachers and students. We make it harder by not giving them the resources they need, and then we act like, well, we can just blame individuals for these problems instead of looking at the whole system, right? If we just say, well, oh, the union stopped us from hiring the bad teachers, right? If we just got rid of the bad teachers, that would fix everything. Or the administration doesn't care, parents don't care, kids don't care, teachers don't care. Well, when we blame individuals, right, the problem with that is that then we try to solve those problems by just thinking about individuals as well, right? We just, the thing we really need is we just need a great teacher like you. Well, the admin, we just need new admin because the admin don't care, right? We need a new disciplinary policy, right? If we fix student behavior, right? If those individuals' behavior is better, that'll fix our problems. No, we need a new way to talk to parents, right? All of these things are good, right? All of these things are good, right? Like, we do need great teachers. We may need new admin. We may need a new disciplinary policy, and we definitely need to communicate with parents. But those individual fixes don't fix the systemic problems that we just discussed previously, right? So what can you do, right? Become a teacher, right? Do become the best teacher you can, because our kids do need great teachers, right? But you got to be more than that, right? Become a community member as well, right? Become politically active, right? It's cliche, right? But think globally and act locally. Be a great teacher in the classroom, but then do more, right? Get plugged into what other people are already doing, right? And help energize stakeholders, right? There's people who've been shouting and they're feeling tired. Help them, right? Be an extra voice, right? Help amplify the voices of those people who are already talking. And send your kids to the public school district that you teach in, right? Don't put your kids in private schools. Don't put your kids in some suburban school district while you're teaching in an urban school district, right? A part of our issue is people pulling their kids out of these schools instead of fighting to make the schools better, right? So take risks, have fun. In conclusion, we don't have an achievement gap. We have an opportunity gap. We can help a few by being the best teacher we can. So do become a teacher, become awesome, become better. But we can help more kids if we acknowledge the problem just isn't bad teachers or absentee parents or undisciplined kids. The communities that make up the majority of urban public school students have been systematically hurt and neglected. We cannot fix schools without fixing the communities they serve. Thank you, and be well.